I'm Priscilla, 32, and I've always been the other daughter in my family. While I wore hand-me-downs, my sister Madison sparkled in designer outfits since childhood. Her 16th birthday brought a Ferrari, and now her college graduation gift package included $33 million, a custom-built mansion, and a Tesla. I'd accepted my place in the family shadows until that graduation party, when a distinguished stranger approached me with an envelope that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. Before I share this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked in your own family. Trust me, what happened next is something you won't want to miss. Growing up in the Lambert household was an exercise in contrasts. My father, William Lambert, wasn't always the tech mogul whose name now graces business magazines and industry awards. When I was born, he was just a hungry young programmer with big dreams and a small apartment in Seattle. My mother, Eleanor, came from a wealthy East Coast family, but had temporarily fallen out of favor with her parents for marrying beneath her station. Those early years were modest but happy in my fragmented memories. Just the three of us in a two-bedroom apartment, my father working late into the night on his computer, while my mother read me bedtime stories. Everything changed when I was 7. My father's data compression algorithm revolutionized cloud storage capabilities, and suddenly Lambert Tech was the hottest startup in the industry. Within 18 months, my father sold a minority stake to investors for $80 million while maintaining control of the company. We moved from our apartment to a sprawling estate in Medina with a view of Lake Washington. My mother reconciled with her parents once we had money, and our social circle transformed overnight. Then Madison arrived. My sister was born into wealth. Her nursery featured in an architectural digest spread before she could even crawl. From the beginning, Madison was different from me. Blonde like our mother, while I had our father's dark hair, socially confident, while I was bookish and shy. As she grew, it became apparent that Madison had inherited my mother's classic beauty and social grace, while I remained awkwardly in my own skin, more comfortable with computers than conversation. The differences in how we were raised became apparent early on. When I was 8, and Madison was a baby, I overheard my mother telling a friend, "It's wonderful to finally be able to give a child everything she deserves from the start." The comment stung in ways my young mind couldn't fully articulate. As we grew, the pattern solidified. Madison's closet overflowed with Burberry, Versace, and custom-made outfits, while I received sensible clothing from department stores. When I turned 12, I received a modest birthday celebration with a store-bought cake and a few friends. When Madison turned 12, 5 years later, our parents rented out the Seattle Aquarium for an underwater-themed extravaganza with professional mermaids swimming among the exhibits and gift bags containing Apple Watches for each guest. I tried not to be jealous. After all, circumstances had changed. It wasn't Madison's fault she was born into abundance, while I had experienced the lean years. Still, it wasn't just about material things. My father would move mountains to attend Madison's soccer games, but routinely missed my debate competitions. When I won the state science fair at 16 with a machine learning algorithm that could predict potential hardware failures, my parents sent their assistant to the ceremony with a congratulatory card. That same year, Madison got a Ferrari for her birthday, despite having failed her driver's test twice. I learned to seek validation elsewhere. My teachers praised my analytical mind, and I graduated as valedictorian. At my graduation ceremony, my parents arrived late and left early for a charity gala. My gift was a card containing a $100 gift certificate to a bookstore. I told myself it was thoughtful. They knew I loved books. That night alone in my room, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not because of the modest gift, but because the card was signed by their assistant. "It's fine," I told myself, wiping away tears. They were busy building the business when I was young. Madison is the baby. It's natural they'd be more invested in her. I just need to make my own way. And that's exactly what I did. The day after my high school graduation, I informed my parents that I would be moving out. I had been accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, but the remaining costs were still substantial. When I asked if they would help with tuition, my father looked genuinely surprised. "Priscilla, you're an adult now," he said, glancing up briefly from his phone. "It's time you learned financial independence." That's how I built myself up. I didn't remind him that he had come from a middle-class family that had paid his state college tuition, or that he'd received a $50,000 loan from my maternal grandfather to start his first business. Instead, I nodded and accepted his decision. I enrolled at the University of Washington instead, cobbling together scholarships and student loans. I found an apartment with 3 roommates and took a job at the campus library. On weekends, I worked at a local tech repair shop, fixing computers and phones for extra cash. Between classes, work and sleep, I barely had time to think about my family's disparate treatment. It was during my sophomore year that I met Zoe Kim in an advanced computer science class. We were paired for a project, and her quick wit and genuine warmth broke through my carefully constructed walls. She invited me to her family's home for Thanksgiving when she learned I wasn't planning to go home for the holiday. "My parents are traveling in Europe with Madison," I explained without emotion. Some graduation trip they promised her when she finished high school. Zoe's Korean-American family embraced me without question. Her mother insisted on sending me home with containers of kimchi and bulgogi after every visit. Her father, a mathematics professor, engaged me in long discussions about algorithms and data structures. For the first time, I experienced what a supportive family felt like. "They're not usually like this," Zoe laughed when I mentioned how welcoming her parents were. "You should see how they grilled my sister's boyfriend. They must really like you." With Zoe's friendship and her family's support, I began to flourish. I maintained a 4.0 GPA while working 20 hours a week. I won a prestigious internship at a rising tech company during my junior year, which turned into a job offer before I even graduated. My graduation from college was a quiet affair. My parents sent a congratulatory text explaining they couldn't attend because Madison had a horseback riding competition that weekend. Zoe's family cheered loudly from the stands, her mother crying happy tears as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma. "We are so proud of you," Mrs. Kim said, hugging me tightly afterward. "You work so hard. You deserve all good things." I started my career at Tech Fusion, a small but promising startup developing enterprise software solutions. My starting salary was modest, but I was determined to prove myself. I worked longer hours than anyone else volunteered for the most challenging projects, and continuously expanded my skill set through online courses and workshops. Within 3 years, I had received 2 promotions and nearly doubled my salary. I moved from my shared apartment to a small but modern 1-bedroom that I could afford on my own. It wasn't anything like my parents' mansion, but it was mine, purchased with my own money, decorated according to my own taste. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall represented a choice I had made for myself. At 27, I was headhunted by Meridian Software, one of the most respected companies in the industry. I became a project manager leading a team of developers on their cloud security initiative. My salary jumped again, and for the first time I felt financially secure. All the while, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I called on holidays and birthdays. I attended the occasional family dinner when invited, listening to my parents, and Madison discussed their travels, their purchases, their social connections. I answered questions about my work briefly, knowing their interest was perfunctory at best. My relationship with Madison remained cordial but distant. 7 years younger than me, she had grown into a beautiful young woman who moved through life with the easy confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. She wasn't malicious or deliberately cruel. She simply had no concept of what it meant to struggle or strive. In her world, doors opened automatically, opportunities appeared without effort, and failures carried no consequences. "You should come skiing with us in Aspen this winter," she would say, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the trip she described so casually would cost more than a month of my salary. "Daddy's rented this amazing chalet with its own chef." I would smile and make vague excuses about work commitments. Madison would pout momentarily before becoming distracted by some new luxury or experience being offered to her. Sometimes I wondered if she even noticed the disparity in our treatment. Did she see how our father's eyes lit up when she entered a room while barely acknowledging my presence? Did she recognize that our mother called her daily while weeks passed between communications with me? Probably not. Why would she question a world that had been tailored to her comfort since birth? I built my life carefully, finding worth in my accomplishments, my independence, my carefully curated circle of true friends. I dated occasionally, but found it difficult to believe that someone could value me for myself, rather than what I could provide or represent. My childhood had taught me that love was conditional, and I hadn't yet unlearned that lesson. Then came the invitation to Madison's graduation from Wellston University, an exclusive private college, where she had spent 5 leisurely years obtaining a degree in communications. The embossed card promised a celebration to remember following the ceremony. I almost declined. A project deadline loomed at work, and the thought of witnessing another display of my parents' blatant favoritism made my stomach clench. But some sense of familial duty, or perhaps morbid curiosity, compelled me to RSVP affirmatively. I had no idea that decision would unravel the carefully constructed narrative of my entire life. Madison's graduation ceremony was exactly as I expected. Elaborate, exclusive, and designed to impress. Wellston University's campus sprawled across prime real estate near Boston Harbor, its historic buildings and manicured grounds, projecting an aura of privilege and tradition. As a graduate of a public university, I felt the intended intimidation of the space, the subtle message that some educational experiences were simply superior to others. I found my parents in the reserved section. My mother elegant in Chanel, my father distinguished in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. They greeted me with distracted kisses to the air beside my cheeks, already turning back to chat with the parents of Madison's friends before I could even sit down. "Darling, you remember the Andersons, don't you?" my mother said, gesturing to a couple on her right. Their son Bradley just acquired that marvelous tech startup. "What was it called again? Harold Quantum Solutions?" the silver-haired man replied. "Quite a bargain at $40 million. The founders had no idea what they were sitting on." I did know Quantum Solutions. They had developed a revolutionary approach to quantum encryption that would likely be worth billions within 5 years. If they had sold for only $40 million, they had indeed been fleeced. I kept this knowledge to myself, smiling politely before taking my seat. The ceremony dragged on with self-congratulatory speeches about excellence and tradition. When Madison finally crossed the stage to receive her diploma, my parents stood and cheered loudly, my father whistling through his fingers like a sports fan. I clapped appropriately, remembering how I had crossed a different stage alone with only Zoe's family to acknowledge my achievement. The real spectacle, however, was the after-party at my parents' second home in Cape Cod. The sprawling oceanfront property had been transformed into a graduation wonderland, with white marquees on the lawn, caterers circulating with champagne and canapes, and a live band playing Madison's favourite songs. At least 100 guests mingled across the grounds, most of them strangers to me. I wandered through the crowd nursing a single glass of champagne and making awkward small talk when necessary. Several times I heard variations of the same question. "And how do you know Madison?" The surprise on people's faces when I identified myself as her sister told me everything I needed to know about how rarely Madison mentioned my existence. The gift presentation was scheduled for sunset. My parents gathered everyone around the main terrace overlooking the ocean, the setting sun casting a golden glow that their event planner had undoubtedly timed with precision. "Today we celebrate not just Madison's academic achievement," my father announced, his arm around my sister's shoulders, "but her entry into adult life. Her mother and I couldn't be prouder of the woman she's become." Madison beamed, her blonde hair catching the light, her designer dress fluttering slightly in the ocean breeze. She looked every inch the golden child, ready to accept her birthright. "To mark this milestone," my father continued, "we wanted to give our daughter the foundation for her future success." My mother stepped forward with an envelope, which Madison opened with practiced grace. Her squeal of delight carried across the terrace as she read the contents. "A trust fund of $33 million, my father announced to appreciative gasps from the assembled guests. $1 million for each year of her life, plus a little extra for good luck. Then came the second gift. My father handed Madison a set of keys with a Tesla logo key fob. "The latest model, he explained, "with all the customizations you wanted, sweetheart. It's parked in the garage." Madison's excitement was palpable as she bounced on her toes, already looking toward the garage area. But my father held up his hand. "One more thing," he said, producing another set of keys. "Your mother and I felt that a young professional needs an appropriate home to start her independent life." He gestured toward a large presentation board that an assistant unveiled with a flourish. On it was a photograph of a stunning modern mansion overlooking the water in Malibu. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, infinity pool, home theatre, wine cellar, and a dedicated yoga studio, my father detailed proudly. "All furnished and ready for you to move in whenever you're ready." The crowd erupted in applause and exclamations. Madison hugged our parents, tears of joy streaming down her face. "It's perfect," she gushed, though I noticed her slight frown when examining the Tesla key more closely. "Though is this the standard range or the long-range battery?" "The standard," my father admitted. They couldn't get the long range in time for today. "That's okay," Madison said, her disappointment barely concealed. "I can always upgrade later." Standing at the edge of the gathering, I clutched a small wrapped package, my gift to Madison. Inside was a handmade photo album I'd spent weeks creating with pictures of us as children, accompanied by my handwritten memories of those moments. It had seemed meaningful when I was working on it in my apartment. Now it felt pathetically inadequate. When the formal presentation ended and guests dispersed to continue celebrating, I approached Madison with my small offering. "Congratulations," I said, handing her the package. "I'm really proud of you." Madison unwrapped it quickly, her expression falling slightly as she realized it wasn't jewelry or something similarly expensive. "Oh, pictures," she said, flipping through a few pages with cursory interest. "That's sweet, very retro. I'll put it somewhere safe." She tucked the album under her arm and was immediately distracted by friends calling her to come see something. The album was left abandoned on a nearby table moments later. I retreated to a quiet corner of the garden, finding a stone bench partially hidden by ornamental grasses. The sun had set completely now, and subtle landscape lighting illuminated the paths while leaving this particular spot in comfortable shadow. I considered leaving early. No one would notice my absence anyway, but the thought of driving back to Boston in the dark after champagne gave me pause. As I sat there watching the celebration from a distance, I couldn't help but reflect on the staggering difference between Madison's graduation gifts and my own. Even accounting for inflation and my parents' increased wealth over the years, the disparity was breathtaking. I had received a $100 gift card. Madison had received $33 million, a mansion, and a Tesla. And yet, oddly, I felt a strange sort of peace. I had built my life without their assistance. Everything I had earned. There was a satisfaction in that self-sufficiency that Madison might never know. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice the man approaching until he was standing directly in front of me. "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. I looked up at a distinguished-looking gentleman, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. His suit was expensive, but understated his manner polite but confident. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place where I might have seen him before. "Of course," I replied, shifting slightly to make more room. He sat down with the careful movement of someone managing minor joint pain, then turned to study me with surprising intensity. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked after a moment. I examined his face more carefully. "I'm sorry, you do seem familiar, but I can't quite place you." He smiled, the expression warming his entire face. "I'm not surprised. The last time I saw you in person, you were about 5 years old. My name is Edward Bennett." The name triggered an immediate connection. "You were my father's business partner," I said, the realization dawning. "From the early days of Lambert Tech." "That's right," he confirmed, though partner is a generous description for what your father would probably term early employee. There was something in his tone, a hint of bitterness beneath the politeness, that caught my attention. "I didn't realize you were still in touch with the family," I said. "I don't remember seeing you at events before." "Oh, I'm not invited to Lambert family functions," Edward said with a small dry laugh. "I crashed this particular party with a specific purpose in mind." My guard immediately went up. Was this some disgruntled former associate looking to make trouble? "And what purpose is that?" I asked cautiously. Edward's expression softened as he studied my face. "You know you have your mother's cheekbones," he observed, ignoring my question temporarily. "But your eyes, those are definitely not William's eyes." An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach. "Mr. Bennett, I'm not sure what you're getting at, but—" "I've been watching the family for years," he interrupted gently. "From a distance, of course. I've seen how they treat you, compared to your sister." I stiffened. "That's really none of your business." "Perhaps not," he acknowledged. "But I've reached a point in my life where I can no longer keep certain truths to myself, particularly when those truths might explain why William and Eleanor Lambert have spent your entire life treating you like an unwelcome reminder rather than a beloved daughter." My heart began to pound as Edward reached inside his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "Your father didn't build his empire alone," he said, holding out the envelope to me. "And sometimes the truth is the only gift that matters." With trembling fingers, I accepted the envelope. It was heavyweight cream stationery, sealed with wax, like something from another era. "What is this?" I managed to ask. "The answers to questions you may not even know you had," Edward replied, rising from the bench with some effort. "Read it privately, and if you wish to speak afterward, my contact information is inside." He hesitated, then added more softly, "I've waited a very long time for this moment, Priscilla. Longer than I should have. For that, I'm truly sorry." Before I could respond, a voice called from the main garden path. "Priscilla, who are you talking to?" My mother appeared, champagne flute in hand, her expression sharpening as she spotted Edward. The colour drained from her face. "You..." she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How dare you come here? Edward inclined his head slightly. Hello, Eleanor. You're looking well. Wealth becomes you. It always did. My mother turned to me, her composure cracking slightly. Priscilla, go back to the party immediately. This man has no right to be here. Actually, Edward said calmly, I was just leaving. He turned back to me. Remember what I said. He walked away with dignified purpose, disappearing down a garden path before my mother could summon security. What did he say to you? She demanded once he was gone. What did he give you? I slipped the envelope into my purse. Nothing important. I lied, unsure why I felt the need to protect this secret. Just congratulations for Madison. My mother's eyes narrowed suspiciously. That man is a bitter, jealous liar who has held a grudge against your father for decades. Whatever he told you, whatever he gave you, it's poison. Do you understand me? The vehemence in her voice only intensified my curiosity. I understand, I said neutrally. She studied my face for a moment longer, then seemed to regain her composure. Good. Now come back to the party. People are asking where you've gone. Actually, I think I'll head back to Boston, I said, suddenly desperate to be alone with the mysterious envelope. I have an early meeting tomorrow. On a Saturday, my mother questioned. The tech industry doesn't observe traditional work weeks, I replied, which was true enough, though I had no actual meeting. My mother didn't argue further, her social mask sliding back into place. Well, say goodbye to your sister before you leave. I found Madison surrounded by friends already making plans to visit her new Malibu home. I'm heading out, I told her, interrupting briefly. Congratulations again. You're leaving already, she asked, though, without much disappointment. Thanks for coming, and for the photo thing. It was cute. I hugged her quickly, noting how she barely returned the embrace before turning back to her friends. My father was deep in conversation with potential investors, and merely waved absently when I caught his eye to indicate my departure. As I drove away from the estate, the envelope seemed to burn in my purse. Whatever it contained, I sensed it would change everything, and I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for that change. The drive back to Boston felt interminable. Traffic on the Cape was heavy even at night, and my mind raced with possibilities about the envelope's contents. Who exactly was Edward Bennett to my family? My mother's reaction to his presence had been visceral. Fear mixed with anger and something else I couldn't quite identify. By the time I reached my apartment, it was past midnight. I kicked off my heels at the door, made a cup of chamomile tea, and settled onto my couch, the envelope placed on the coffee table before me. For several minutes, I simply stared at it, both eager to discover its contents and afraid of what truths it might contain. This is ridiculous, I finally muttered to myself. It's just an envelope. I broke the wax seal and carefully extracted the contents, a collection of documents, old photographs, and a handwritten letter on the same heavy cream stationery as the envelope. I began with the letter. Dear Priscilla, if you're reading this, you've finally allowed me the opportunity I've sought for 27 years, the chance to tell you the truth about your family, your father, and yourself. I should begin by stating plainly what you may already suspect from our brief interaction. William Lambert is not your biological father. I am. I nearly dropped the letter, my hands shaking so badly that tea sloshed over the rim of my cup. This couldn't be true. It was absurd, the delusional claim of a resentful former business associate. And yet, something resonated as truth answering questions I'd carried my entire life about why I'd always been treated differently. I forced myself to continue reading. Your mother Eleanor and I met at Stanford in 1984, where I was a doctoral candidate in computer science, and she was completing her undergraduate degree in art history. We fell deeply in love and were together for nearly 3 years. Eleanor became pregnant with you in late 1989, a development that delighted me but terrified her parents, who had specific plans for their daughter's future that didn't include a marriage to an academic with modest prospects. During this period, I was developing a revolutionary data compression algorithm, the very algorithm that would later become the foundation of Lambert Tech. William Lambert was a fellow researcher who became aware of my work through departmental presentations. While Eleanor was in her first trimester with you, her parents introduced her to William at a fundraising gala, presenting him as a more suitable match, a young man from a respectable family with entrepreneurial ambitions. Casson, what happened next was a betrayal on multiple fronts. Eleanor broke off our relationship with little explanation. Weeks later, I discovered William had somehow obtained my research and was preparing to patent it under his own name. By the time I realised what had happened, Eleanor and William were engaged, the patent paperwork was filed, and initial investor meetings were already taking place. I confronted William with evidence of the theft expecting denial. Instead, he offered me a settlement, a significant sum of money, and a small percentage of future royalties, in exchange for my silence, and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. He also made it clear that if I refused his family's connections and legal resources would ensure I never worked in technology again. I was young, hurt, and ultimately practical. I took the settlement, signed the NDA, and watched from the sidelines as William built an empire on my work. I told myself the money was compensation enough, that Eleanor had made her choice, that pursuing the matter further would only bring pain to all involved. What I didn't know then was that you were already growing within Eleanor, that you were my daughter, not his. I only discovered this possibility years later when I happened to see a photograph of you in a tech magazine feature about William Lambert's family. You were perhaps 5 years old, but I recognized my mother's distinctive eyes staring back at me from the page. I've spent the years since then watching your life from a distance, restricted by the NDA from approaching you or making any claims publicly. I've seen how William and Eleanor have treated you compared to their biological daughter. I've witnessed your struggles and your triumphs, your remarkable resilience and intelligence. I recognize in you not just physical traits from my side of the family, but the same analytical mind, the same determination that has driven my own career. You may wonder why I've chosen now to break my silence. The answer is sadly pragmatic. I was recently diagnosed with pancreatic cancer stage 4. My doctors give me perhaps 6 months. With nothing left to lose, the NDA that has constrained me for decades no longer holds power. Included with this letter, you'll find documentation supporting everything I've claimed, photographs of your mother and me during our relationship, copies of my original research papers that predate William's patent application, and, perhaps most convincingly, the results of a DNA analysis I had performed using a discarded coffee cup from a tech conference where you spoke last year. The genetic markers leave little doubt of our relationship. I don't share this information to disrupt your life or to seek revenge against William and Eleanor. Too many years have passed for such petty motivations. I tell you because you deserve to know the truth about yourself, about why you've always been treated as somehow less than within the Lambert household. The simple fact is that you're not a Lambert at all. If you wish to meet and learn more, my contact information is below. If not, I understand completely. Either way, know this: I have watched you grow into an extraordinary woman who has achieved remarkable things entirely on her own merit. Where William and Eleanor have failed to show proper pride in you, I have felt it tenfold from afar. Whatever you decide, I've instructed my attorneys to transfer my estate to you upon my death. A poor substitute for the lifetime of support I should have provided, but the only amends I can now offer. With deepest regrets and profound pride. Edward Bennett. I read the letter 3 times each reading, bringing new waves of shock and disbelief. With trembling hands, I spread the accompanying documents across my coffee table. There were photographs of Edward and my mother, young, beautiful, and clearly in love, standing on beaches, hiking in forests, laughing in what appeared to be a small apartment. In one particularly striking image, Edward had his arms wrapped around my mother from behind his hands, resting gently on her stomach, in the protective gesture of an expectant father. Next came the technical documents. Research papers with Edward's name dated months before my father's. No Williams. First patent application. The algorithmic approach was identical, the mathematical proofs and implementation strategies clearly the work of the same mind. Finally, the DNA test results laid out in clinical precision. The probability of paternity 99.998%. I sat back, struggling to breathe, my world tilting on its axis. If these documents were authentic, everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. My father wasn't my father. My mother had engaged in a massive deception. My treatment throughout childhood suddenly made perfect sense. I wasn't the other daughter. I was the living reminder of Eleanor's previous relationship, the child of the man William had betrayed. Around 3 a.m, overwhelmed by revelations I could no longer process alone, I called Zoe. "Scylla," she answered groggily. "Are you okay? It's the middle of the night." "I need you," I said, my voice breaking. "Something's happened. Can you come over?" To her eternal credit, Zoe didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't do anything crazy before I get there." She arrived in 18 minutes. Yeah, still wearing pajama pants under her coat, her hair hastily pulled into a ponytail. One look at my face and she wrapped me in a tight hug. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "My whole life is a lie," I whispered, guiding her to the coffee table where the documents remained spread out. Zoe read the letter, examined the photographs, and studied the DNA results with the careful attention of someone who understood the gravity of the moment. When she finally looked up, her expression was a mixture of shock and sorrow. "Oh, Scylla," she said softly, "this explains so much." "If it's true," I countered, still clinging to denial, "it could be elaborate fiction, a scheme for revenge or money." "The DNA test looks legitimate," Zoe pointed out, "and it would explain why your parents, why William and Eleanor, have always treated you differently." We stayed up the entire night examining each document, discussing the implications, weighing the possibilities. By the time dawn broke over Boston casting golden light through my apartment windows, I had made a decision. "I need to meet him," I said. "Edward. I need to hear the full story directly from him." Zoe nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" I considered the offer, grateful beyond words for her friendship. "No, I think this is something I need to do alone, but maybe wait for my call afterward." "Always," she promised. I texted the number Edward had provided in his letter, asking to meet that afternoon. His response came within minutes, an address in Cambridge and a simple message: "I'll be waiting. No pressure, no expectations." Before meeting him, however, I had one more task. I called a lawyer friend from college who specialized in document verification and intellectual property law, asking if she could review the materials urgently. She agreed to meet me for an early lunch. Jennifer studied the documents carefully while we sat in a quiet corner of a cafe near her office. "If these are forgeries, they're exceptional ones," she concluded after a thorough examination. "The technical papers have all the hallmarks of authentic academic work from that period. The formatting, citation style, even the type of paper is consistent with Stanford Computer Science Department publications from the late 1980s. And the patent documentation. The timeline matches what Edward is claiming. His research predates William Lambert's patent application by almost 8 months. If this were brought to court today, which it can't be due to statute of limitations, it would raise serious questions about the origins of Lambert Tech's core technology." I nodded, processing this additional confirmation. "Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate your discretion with this." "Of course," she assured me. "But Priscilla, whatever you decide to do with this information, proceed carefully. The Lambert family has enormous resources and influence." "I'm well aware," I replied grimly. At precisely 3:00 that afternoon, I stood outside a brownstone in Cambridge, gathering my courage before ringing the doorbell. The door was opened by a middle-aged woman in nursing scrubs who introduced herself as Marta Edwards' home healthcare aide. She led me through a tastefully appointed home to a sunroom at the back where Edward sat in a comfortable chair overlooking a small but meticulously maintained garden. He looked frailer than he had the previous evening, the harsh afternoon light accentuating the pallor of his skin and the hollows beneath his cheekbones. Cancer was already claiming him, just as his letter had stated. Yet his eyes, the same deep brown as my own I now realized, lit up when he saw me. "Priscilla," he said, his voice warm but weak. "You came." "I had to," I replied, taking the seat across from him. "I have so many questions." He nodded. "And I owe you all the answers I can provide." "Where would you like to begin?" For the next 3 hours, Edward filled in the gaps of the story, painting a vivid picture of his relationship with my mother, the development of the algorithm that would make William Lambert billions, and the devastating betrayal that had altered all their lives. "Your mother wasn't a villain in this," he said, surprising me with his generosity. "She was young, vulnerable to her parents' influence. They convinced her that William could provide security and social standing that I couldn't match as an academic. By the time she realized what William had done with my research, she was already married to him and pregnant with you." "Did she know?" I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "That you were my biological father, not William." Edward's expression grew somber. "I believe she suspected, yes. The timing alone would have raised questions. But William was determined to present you as his own, to maintain the narrative of the perfect family, even as he resented your very existence. That explains so much about my childhood," I whispered. "I wanted to come forward so many times," Edward continued, "especially when I began to see how you were being treated. But the NDA was airtight, and William made it clear that any violation would result in legal action that would bankrupt me and potentially harm you in the process. So you just watched from a distance. Not entirely passively, he corrected gently. That scholarship you received for university, the anonymous donor was me. The internship that launched your career, I was on the board of that company and made sure your application received proper consideration. I couldn't be your father in name, but I tried to provide invisible support when possible. Tears welled in my eyes at this revelation. The scholarship that had made college possible, that had changed the trajectory of my life, had come from this man who had watched over me from afar. I have a trust, Edward continued. It was established decades ago with you as the sole beneficiary. It contains my portion of the Lambert Tech royalties. The settlement William paid for my silence. With investments and growth over time, it's worth approximately $40 million now. It becomes yours regardless of whether you choose to acknowledge me publicly. I shook my head overwhelmed. I don't want money, I just want the truth. The truth is yours, he said simply. What you do with it is entirely your decision. I've made my peace with the past, Priscilla. My only regret is not finding a way to be part of your life sooner. As our conversation continued, I found myself studying Edward's face, noting the similarities between us that went beyond eye colour. The same slightly crooked smile, the same way of tilting our heads when considering a complex question, the same expressive hands that moved when we spoke. Would you be willing to tell me about your family? I asked. My family, I suppose. Edward's face brightened. I'd like nothing more. For another hour, he shared stories of his parents, my grandparents, both academics who had valued education and integrity above all else. He showed me photographs of his childhood in Minnesota, his college years at MIT before Stanford, his sister, my aunt, who was a neurologist in Chicago. She doesn't know about you yet, he admitted. I wanted to speak with you first to respect your privacy and your choices, but Sarah would love to meet you if you're open to that. As the afternoon faded into evening, Marta gently reminded Edward that he needed to take his medication and rest. I realized with a pang how much our conversation had taxed his limited energy. I should go, I said, rising reluctantly. Will you come again? He asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. Yes, I promised without hesitation. Tomorrow, if that's not too soon. The relief in his expression was answer enough. As I left the brownstone, my mind was spinning with revelations and decisions. What would I do with this knowledge? Confront William and Eleanor, keep Edward's secret. How would this change my understanding of myself and my place in the world? One thing was certain, I needed to speak with my parents, the people who had raised me however imperfectly, and hear their version of the truth. I spent Sunday with Edward learning more about my biological father and the family history I'd never known. By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I called my parents' home in Medina, knowing they would have returned from Cape Cod by now. Lambert residence, answered their housekeeper. This is Priscilla, I said. I need to speak with my parents. It's important. There was a pause. Mrs. Lambert is not available at the moment and Mr. Lambert is at the office. Then please tell them I'll be arriving for dinner tonight, I said firmly. It's a family matter that can't wait. After another pause, I'll inform them of your plans. I took the afternoon flight from Boston to Seattle, rented a car at the airport, and drove the familiar route to the waterfront estate where I'd spent my teenage years. My stomach clenched with anxiety as I approached the imposing gates, but a newfound determination pushed me forward. For once, I wasn't arriving as the dutiful, invisible daughter. I was coming with purpose and truth on my side. The housekeeper admitted me with her usual professional courtesy, informing me that my parents were waiting in the formal dining room. As I walked through the grand foyer with its soaring ceilings and museum-quality art, I was struck by how alien it all felt now. This had never truly been my home, and perhaps on some level I had always known that. My parents were indeed waiting, seated at opposite ends of the long mahogany dining table. My mother looked tense, her usual perfect posture even more rigid. My father, no William, wore the impatient expression of someone whose important work had been interrupted. Priscilla, my mother said, her voice carefully modulated. This is unexpected. You rarely visit without a holiday obligation. I needed to speak with you both, I replied, remaining standing despite the empty chair clearly set for me. About Edward Bennett. The name landed like a grenade in the pristine dining room. My mother's hand jerked, spilling wine onto the immaculate tablecloth. William's face darkened with anger. I told you he was nothing but trouble, my mother hissed, turning to William. We should have had security remove him immediately. What did that man tell you? William demanded, his voice hard. Whatever it was, understand that Edward Bennett has nursed a pathological jealousy toward me for decades. He can't accept that my success came from my own innovation, while he remained an academic theorist. I withdrew the envelope from my bag, placing it on the table between us. He told me the truth, that he is my biological father, that you stole his algorithm and built Lambert Tech on his work, that my mother was pregnant with me when she left him for you. Preposterous, William sputtered, though I noticed he didn't reach for the envelope or its damning contents. My mother's reaction was more telling. She closed her eyes briefly, her composure cracking to reveal genuine distress. He has no proof, William continued. This is a pathetic attempt to extort money from our family using manipulative lies. There's DNA evidence, I countered calmly, and extensive documentation of his original research predating your patent application. I've had both verified by independent experts. William's face flushed dangerously. If Bennett thinks he can overturn decades of established business with some fabricated evidence and a DNA test of questionable provenance, he's delusional. My legal team will... William, my mother interrupted sharply. Stop. The dining room fell silent. My mother looked suddenly older, the careful makeup and designer clothing unable to conceal the weight of decades of deception. Is it true? I asked her directly. Am I Edward's daughter, not William's? She met my gaze, and for perhaps the first time in my life, I saw her look at me without the veil of resentment that had always coloured her perception. Yes, she admitted quietly. The timing. It was impossible for you to be William's child, though we agreed to present you that way to the world. William slammed his fist on the table, rattling the crystal and silver. Eleanor, we discussed this. That man signed an NDA. Any claims he's making are in direct violation. He's dying, I cut in. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. In a few months your NDA won't matter because he'll be gone. He wanted me to know the truth before that happened. This information seemed to momentarily deflate William's rage. He sat back, calculating the implications with the same cold efficiency he applied to business problems. So what is it you want? He asked finally. Money? A public acknowledgement to destroy this family's reputation. I want to understand why. I said, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside me. Why you treated me as less than Madison my entire life. Why you made me feel like I was never good enough, never truly part of the family. What did you expect? William snapped. To raise another man's child as my own, to love the living reminder of your mother's betrayal. I betrayed Edward, not you, my mother interjected, surprising me with her defense. You knew exactly who I was leaving and why when we became involved. You knew I was pregnant. I turned to her, pieces falling into place. You knew I wasn't William's child, and you still let me grow up feeling unwanted. My mother had the grace to look ashamed. It was complicated, Priscilla. William agreed to raise you as his own, but only if we had another child together. Only if there would be a real Lambert heir. By the time Madison was born, the pattern was established. I'm not proud of my weakness of how I allowed you to be treated, but changing it would have meant confronting truths we had all agreed to bury. For what it's worth, she added softly, you have always reminded me so much of him. Your intelligence, your quiet determination. Even as a child, you had Edward's analytical mind, his ethical centre. William saw those similarities too, and they troubled him. Troubled him, I repeated incredulously. I was a child. I deserved love and support regardless of whose DNA I carried. Yes, my mother admitted, tears forming in her eyes. You did. I failed you in that. We both did. William, however, remained unmoved. If Bennett thinks he can use you to extract some kind of late-life revenge against me, he's gravely miscalculated. My attorneys will what? I challenged. Sue a dying man, tried to silence me as well. I'm not interested in revenge or money or destroying your precious reputation. I simply wanted the truth, and now I have it. I gathered the envelope and its contents, returning them to my bag. Edward hasn't asked me to go public with any of this. He simply wanted me to understand why I've always been treated as an outsider in my own family. Now I do. If you think this changes anything legally, William began, his business mind still clearly calculating risks and liabilities. I don't want your money, I interrupted. I never have. I've built my own career, my own life without your help. All I ever wanted was to be treated with the same love and respect you gave Madison. To understand why that was impossible for you. Now I know. I turned to leave, feeling strangely lighter, despite the painful confrontation. Priscilla, wait, my mother called. What will you do now? I paused at the dining room doorway. I'm going to spend whatever time Edward has left getting to know my real father. Beyond that, I haven't decided. As I drove away from the Lambert estate, my phone buzzed with a text message. Surprisingly, it was from Madison. Mum just called me crying. What happened? Are you okay? I pulled over, considering how to respond. Madison had never been deliberately cruel to me. She had simply accepted the family dynamic as normal, having never known anything different. She was as much a product of our parents' choices as I was. It's complicated. I texted back. Can we talk tomorrow? I'm flying back to Boston in the morning. Breakfast. We arranged to meet at a cafe near her hotel. That night in my hotel room, I called Zoe to update her on the confrontation with William and Eleanor. How do you feel? She asked when I'd finished recounting the conversation. Oddly peaceful, I admitted. Like a puzzle piece that never quite fit has finally been removed, and now I understand why. What about Madison? Will you tell her? I think I have to. She deserves to know the truth about our family too. The next morning, Madison was waiting when I arrived at the cafe, looking uncharacteristically serious in jeans and a simple sweater rather than her usual designer ensemble. Mum wouldn't tell me what happened, she said as soon as I sat down. Just that there was a family situation and that I should talk to you. Are you okay? You're not sick or something, are you? The genuine concern in her voice touched me. I'm not sick, I assured her. But I did discover something that affects our whole family. Over the next hour, I explained everything as gently as I could. Edward's appearance at her graduation party, his revelations, the confrontation with our parents, the DNA evidence. Madison listened with increasing shock, her coffee growing cold and forgotten before her. So Dad, isn't your dad? She finally said, struggling to process the information. Biologically, no. William Lambert is not my father. Madison shook her head in disbelief. That's why they always treated you differently. All this time I thought, I don't know what I thought. That maybe you'd done something to disappoint them, or that you just didn't want to be part of family things. You noticed the difference? I asked, surprised by this admission. Of course I notice, she said, looking almost offended. I'm not completely self-absorbed despite what you probably think. I didn't know how to address it. It was always that way for as long as I can remember. She reached across the table and took my hand, perhaps the first genuinely affectionate gesture between us in years. I'm so sorry, Priscilla. I should have said something, done something. You were a child too, I reminded her. It wasn't your responsibility to fix our parents' mistakes. Madison was quiet for a moment, absently turning her coffee cup. You know what's weird? I always envied you. Envied me, I repeated incredulously. Madison, you had everything. The clothes, the cars, the trust fund, the constant approval and attention. I had things, she corrected. You had yourself, your accomplishments, your independence. Do you know I've never actually earned anything in my life? Everything has been given to me. College jobs arranged through Dad's connections, now this trust fund and house. Sometimes I wonder what I'd be capable of if I'd had to work for something, anything the way you have. This perspective shift left me momentarily speechless. I had spent so many years envying Madison's material advantages and our parents' approval that I'd never considered she might envy my self-sufficiency. It's not too late, you know, I said gently. You have this incredible foundation now, financial security, education. You could use it to build something meaningful, something that's truly yours. Madison nodded thoughtfully. Maybe I could. I've always been interested in sustainable fashion, but Dad said it wasn't a serious business prospect. She looked up with newfound determination. I think it's time I stopped letting Dad dictate my choices too. I'd support that, I offered, feeling the first tentative bridge forming between us as adult sisters rather than childhood rivals. So what happens now? Madison asked. With your biological father, with our parents, with everything. I'm going to spend time with Edward while I can, I said. Beyond that, I'm still figuring it out. I don't plan to go public with any of this if that's what you're worried about. Madison shook her head. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about you, about us. Does this mean you won't be my sister anymore? The vulnerability in her question touched me deeply. Madison DNA doesn't define family. We grew up together. We share history, memories. I'll always be your sister if you want me to be. I do, she said with unexpected fervor. More than ever. As we parted outside the cafe, Madison hugged me tightly. A real embrace, not the air-kiss social performance we usually exchanged. Keep me updated about everything, okay? And maybe I could meet Edward sometime. I think he'd like that. I said, genuinely moved by her interest. Over the next 2 months, I rearranged my work schedule to spend 3 days a week in Cambridge with Edward. We made up for lost time with an urgency driven by his declining health, sharing stories, discovering shared interests and traits, building the father-daughter relationship we should have had all along. Edward introduced me to his sister Sarah, my aunt, who welcomed me into the family with immediate and unconditional warmth. I learned about my biological grandparents, saw photographs of generations of Bennets, and began to understand where many of my own characteristics had originated. To my surprise, Eleanor called me about a month after our confrontation, asking to meet privately. We sat in a quiet corner of the Boston Public Garden, the spring flowers blooming around us in vibrant contrast to the heavy conversation. "I've left William," she said without preamble. "After 32 years, I finally found the courage to walk away. I hadn't expected this development, because of the revelations about Edward." "Partly," she acknowledged, "but mostly because of what happened after you left that night." William was furious. Not about the possible damage to his reputation, but about the fact that you weren't intimidated by him, that you walked away on your own terms. He said things, cruel things, about you, about Edward, and suddenly I couldn't bear it anymore. Couldn't bear who I'd become by staying silent all these years. She twisted her hands in her lap, bereft of the wedding ring she'd worn for decades. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Priscilla. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to find my way back to the person I was before. The young woman who loved Edward Bennet for his brilliant mind and kind heart. The woman who might have been a better mother to you if she'd made different choices. I'm spending time with Edward now," I told her, "getting to know him while I can." Eleanor nodded, tears filling her eyes. "He's a good man. He always was. Is he? How is his health?" "Declining," I admitted. "The doctors give him weeks now, not months." "Would he? Do you think he would be willing to see me?" she asked hesitantly. "There are things I need to say to him before it's too late. Apologies I need to make." I considered the request carefully. "I'll ask him. I can't promise anything." To my surprise, when I broached the subject with Edward, he agreed immediately to see Eleanor. "There are no villains in this story, Priscilla," he told me. "Only flawed people making difficult choices. I made my peace with Eleanor's decision long ago." Their reunion was private, at Edward's request, but afterward he seemed lighter somehow, as if a final burden had been lifted. "Some circles need to be closed," was all he would say about the meeting. As summer approached, Edward's health deteriorated rapidly. I took a leave of absence from work to be with him full-time, moving temporarily into the guest room of his Cambridge home. Madison visited twice, connecting with Edward with surprising ease. Even Sarah relocated temporarily from Chicago to spend these precious final weeks with her brother. We became a small, unconventional family unit, gathering around Edward's bed to share meals, watch his favourite old films, or simply sit in companionable silence when his energy waned. There was a bittersweet beauty to these days, finding the father I'd always longed for just as I was preparing to lose him. Edward passed away peacefully on a warm July morning, with me holding one hand and Sarah holding the other. His last words to me were, "You were always loved, Priscilla, always." The funeral was small but dignified, attended by colleagues from Edward's academic career, friends from his community, and our newly discovered extended family. Eleanor came standing quietly at the back of the chapel. William did not. A week later, I met with Edward's attorneys for the reading of his will. As he had indicated, he left his entire estate to me, approximately $40 million in liquid assets, his Cambridge home, and most significantly, his original research notes, and a collection of patents he had secured in the decades after leaving Stanford. "Dr. Ray, Bennett wanted you to know," his attorney explained, "that while the statute of limitations prevents any legal claim against Lambert Tech for the original algorithm, these subsequent patents represent his continuing innovations in the field. Several have been licensed to Lambert's competitors over the years, generating substantial royalties. He found a certain poetic justice in that arrangement. I couldn't help but smile through my tears at this revelation. Even silenced by legal agreements and separated from his daughter Edward, had found his own quiet form of reclamation. In the months that followed, I made several significant life changes. I resigned from my position at Meridian Software to establish the Bennett Foundation, dedicated to supporting young women in technology through scholarships and mentorship programs. I kept Edward's Cambridge home, finding comfort in the space where we had finally connected as father and daughter. Madison, inspired by our conversations, used part of her trust fund to launch an eco-friendly fashion line working with sustainable materials and ethical manufacturing practices. To everyone's surprise, perhaps most of all her own, she revealed a genuine talent for design and a previously untapped work ethic. Eleanor filed for divorce from William, a messy public proceeding that exposed some of the Lambert Tech origin stories to scrutiny, though the full truth of Edward's role and my parentage remained private. She eventually moved to a small house in Vermont, where she returned to painting. Her original passion before marriage had redirected her life. William remained entrenched in his empire, though industry rumours suggested Lambert Tech was facing increased competition from nimbler startups, many founded by graduates of the Bennett Foundation's programs. I took no pleasure in his business challenges, but neither did I feel any obligation to protect the man who had rejected me as a child. 1 year after Edward's death, I scattered his ashes from a sailboat off the coast of Maine, near where he had spent childhood summers with his parents. Madison, Sarah, and even Eleanor joined me for this final farewell. As we sailed back toward harbour, Madison linked her arm through mine. "Are you okay?" she asked. I considered the question seriously, looking back over the extraordinary year of revelations and transformations. "I am," I replied honestly. "For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am and where I came from. That's worth more than any inheritance." Madison nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said that day in the cafe, about DNA not defining family. You were right. We're sisters regardless of biology, but I'm also glad you found your real father, even if it was just for a little while." "And so am I." I agreed, watching the shoreline approach. Edward gave me 2 gifts: the truth about my past and the freedom to define my own future. As our boat docked, I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling a sense of completion and possibility that I had never experienced before. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property or even DNA. It's the truth about who you are and the knowledge that you are always worthy of love, regardless of what anyone else might have led you to believe. The Bennett Foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary last month. What began as a personal mission to honour Edward's memory has grown into an organisation that has helped over 500 young women pursue careers in technology with satellite programs in 15 cities across the country. I find immense satisfaction in this work, creating opportunities for others that I had to fight so hard to secure for myself. Madison's sustainable fashion brand has become a legitimate industry force, featured in Vogue, and championed by celebrities committed to environmental causes. She works harder than anyone ever expected, including herself, and the pride she takes in her earned success has transformed her. We speak weekly now, a genuine friendship having replaced our former strained politeness. Eleanor and I have developed a cautious relationship, not quite mother and daughter in the traditional sense, but something uniquely our own. She volunteers at the foundation, occasionally teaching art workshops to our scholarship recipients, as a creative counterbalance to their technical education. Sometimes, when she looks at me, I catch a glimpse of regret for the years we lost, but also hope for the connection we're slowly building. William remains the only closed door in my life. According to Madison, who maintains limited contact with him, he refuses to discuss me or acknowledge the truth about my parentage. Lambert Tech continues to be successful, though no longer the undisputed giant it once was. I neither celebrate nor lament this reality. William Lambert simply exists in a separate universe from mine now. Sarah, my biological aunt, has become a beloved presence in my life. She relocated from Chicago to Boston last year, taking a position at Massachusetts General Hospital that allows us to see each other regularly. Through her, I've connected with cousins and extended family members who have welcomed me with open arms, filling in pieces of my identity I never knew were missing. As for Edward's inheritance, I've used it thoughtfully. The foundation receives the majority of the funding, ensuring his legacy will continue for generations. I maintained his Cambridge home as my primary residence, finding comfort in the spaces where we briefly shared a father-daughter relationship. The research patents continue generating royalties that support both the foundation and my modest personal needs. The envelope that changed everything sits in a fireproof safe in my office. A reminder of how a single act of truth-telling can alter the course of multiple lives. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Edward hadn't approached me that night, if he had taken his secrets to the grave. Would I have continued indefinitely in the Lambert family shadows, never understanding why I could never quite earn their love? The truth, painful as it was, ultimately set me free. free to understand my past, embrace my present, and create a future based on authentic understanding of myself and my place in the world. Last week, I received a letter from a young woman named Amara, the Foundation's most recent scholarship recipient. Before the Bennett Foundation, she wrote, "I never believed someone like me could succeed in tech. Now I know that I belong here, that my voice and perspective matter. You've changed my life by showing me what's possible when someone believes in you." I read her words through tears, hearing echoes of what I had needed so desperately to hear throughout my own childhood. Though Edward and I had only a brief time together, his final gift to me continues to ripple outward, touching lives neither of us could have imagined. Sometimes the most profound inheritances aren't measured in millions of dollars or mansions or luxury cars. Sometimes they come in simple envelopes containing truths that, however painful, allow us to finally become who we were always meant to be. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to share in more authentic life stories. And if you know someone struggling with family acceptance or searching for their true identity, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our experiences is the greatest gift we can give each other. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. It exists unchangeable and true within you.